She had a secret, one she locked away so tightly it became a part of her shadow. Grace Hall was the kind of woman no one noticed. Quiet, efficient, always in the background. But in her silence, she harbored a fire. And its name was Alan Parker. He was everything she wasn't. Charming, brilliant, magnetic, and entirely unreachable. To him, she was just his secretary. To her, he was everything. Until the night he showed up at her door, sweating, shaking, and finally ready to speak the truth. The secret wasn't just hers anymore. Not after that night. Not after those words. Grace Hall, 25, had mastered invisibility. Every day, she arrived at the towering corporate headquarters in downtown Pennsylvania precisely at 7:58 a.m., always 2 minutes early. Her hair was neatly pinned, her glasses just slightly oversized, her skirts modest, and her presence barely noticeable, except to those who needed her, like Alan Parker, the company's financial director. At 33, Alan was already a legend, rising fast, charming everyone, and dating with the frequency of a man who believed that love was a seasonal thing. His parents, humble tool shop owners, had died in a tragic car accident when he was just 12. Since then, ambition became his sanctuary. But behind that effortless smile was a man who hadn't let himself feel deeply. Not since childhood. Grace had admired him from the safety of her silence, organizing his schedule, anticipating his needs, and watching from afar as he moved through the office like a warm gust of wind that never stayed in one place. To everyone else, Grace was just a helper. To Alan, she was reliable. To herself, she was invisible. Except when he smiled at her. Except when he said her name in that low, thoughtful voice. That was when she let herself dream. Just a little. And then something changed. Alan's mood shifted first. His easy smile became less frequent, replaced by furrowed brows and late nights. He started asking Grace to stay late, going over budgets and contracts, searching for what he couldn't name. "Something's off," he'd mutter, staring at spreadsheets like they were riddles carved into stone. Grace would quietly bring coffee, sit beside him, and comb through the numbers with the same meticulous care she used for everything. But this was different. Meant being close. Close enough to smell the faint trace of his cologne, to hear the quiet frustration in his sighs, to feel his presence vibrate through the space between them. Their late nights turned into something more intimate, though neither admitted it. Coffee turned into takeout. Takeout into shared laughter. Shared laughter into small, quiet moments where their hands almost touched. Still, Grace wore her armor. The glasses, the pinned hair, the muted tones of a woman who didn't dare hope. Because every few weeks, he'd mention a new name with a grin. "Went out with this girl, Jessica, I think you'd like her." Grace would nod. "Well, swallow the sting." "He'll never see me," she'd whisper to herself in the mirror. Not like that. But the numbers. The numbers told her a story no one else could see. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Late one Thursday evening, as Alan dozed off at his desk, Grace kept digging. And then she found it. Pattern. Trail. Betrayal. Thousands of dollars were being siphoned off. Slowly. Quietly. By someone very close to Alan. Her heart pounded as she printed the report, slid it under Alan's arm and whispered, "Wake up! I found it." He blinked confused. Then read. Then everything changed. The numbers were undeniable. The betrayal unmistakable. Alan stared at the report with widening eyes, as if the ink burned. He looked up at Grace. "Are you sure?" "Yes," she said, barely a whisper. The next hour was a blur. Calls to legal, to HR, to the CEO. But when it ended, Alan stood still. He turned to Grace, the storm still in his eyes. "You saved this company," he said. But what he didn't say, what he couldn't say, was what her presence had saved in him. That night he made a decision. He would celebrate, and he would do it with her. Only her. The restaurant was one of those quiet, elegant places tucked into an old stone building downtown. Low lighting, candles on every table, string quartet in the corner. Alan reserved a private table by the window. He waited in his dark blazer, glancing at his watch, tapping the edge of his wine glass. And then she arrived. Grace Hall. But not the one he knew. This Grace wore a red dress that clung softly to curves he had never noticed. Her blonde hair fell in gentle waves around her shoulders. Her glasses were gone, revealing eyes the color of spring leaves kissed by rain. For the first time in his life, Alan Parker was speechless. He stood slowly. "Grace. You look different," she offered with a nervous smile. "No," he said. "You look stunning." Dinner was a delicate dance of laughter, glances, silences. Every pause felt filled with something unspoken. And every time she laughed, something inside Alan unraveled. He had seen beauty, dated beauty, but this was something else. Over dessert he found himself just staring. She blushed. "Do I have something on my face?" "No," he said softly. "I'm just seeing you. Really seeing you." The words made her breath hitch. But neither spoke of them again. The following months passed quietly. Grace returned to her usual clothes, her quiet presence. But something had shifted. And Alan couldn't stop thinking about her. He stopped dating. And he didn't even realize it. 7 months passed. Not a single new name. Not a single night out. His co-workers noticed. The office whispered. But Alan's eyes, they only followed one woman now. He told himself it was friendship. He told himself it was respect. But when she smiled at someone else, something in his chest tightened. He missed her when she wasn't around. He looked for excuses to be near. He was falling, and he didn't know what to do. Grace remained the same, or at least pretended to. She was kind, polite, dressed modestly, worked diligently. But inside she wrestled. Had that dinner meant anything to him? Or was it just gratitude? Each time she heard him mention someone on the phone, her heart would ache, imagining another woman receiving the glances she once saw across the candlelight. But then, there were no names, no flirty laughs, no weekend getaways. He had changed. One rainy afternoon, the silence broke. Grace was at her desk when the phone rang. She answered, pen in hand, already jotting a note. "Hello, this is Grace Hall, assistant to Mr. Parker. Hi, I'm Linda Milford. Can I speak to Alan, please? He'll know who I am." Grace froze. The name hit her like cold water. Linda. The soft, feminine voice. the confidence. She transferred the call, then excused herself to the bathroom, locking the door before the tears came. She had been foolish. She'd let herself believe he'd found someone, and this time, it might be real. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't have guessed, was that Linda wasn't a date. She was Alan's therapist. His first call that morning had been to schedule a session. The second was a thank you to Grace. He was done hiding. That night he knocked on her door, wet from the rain, nerves crackling through his fingertips. She opened it in silence. "Grace," he whispered, his voice unsteady. "I can't do this anymore. Pretending I don't see you. Pretending I don't think about you all the time. I went to therapy. I've been trying to fix the mess inside me. But there's one thing I know for sure. See you. I've always seen you. And I don't want to keep you in the background anymore." She stared at him, stunned. Then quietly she stepped aside, letting him in, letting everything in. The shadows, the secrets, the longing. They were no longer separate. Not after that night. Not after those words. And in the quiet hum of her apartment, something else emerged. A new language, spoken through tentative glances and hands reaching across familiar distances. They talked for hours, not just of feelings, but of fears, regrets, and hidden dreams. He shared stories from his childhood. How he hated the silence of the house after his parents died. She told him how she once dreamed of writing novels but gave it up to pay the bills. He listened, really listened, and then said the words she never expected. "Right. I'll help you. You should." And he meant it. Days turned into weeks. They didn't label what they were, didn't define what was growing, but they spent time together. Long walks, quiet dinners, shared books. Their desks remained professional, but their hearts completely intertwined. On a late autumn evening, he handed her a wrapped box. Inside was a leather-bound journal, embossed with her initials. "Start again," he said. She did. And when winter came, he kissed her for the first time, beneath the flicker of office lights, when no one else was watching. It was gentle, careful, honest, and nothing would be the same again. At some point, the rain softened outside, but neither of them noticed. They sat close, knees touching, eyes tired but alive, like something long buried had finally taken its first breath. "I used to dream about this," she said quietly, fingers tracing the rim of her tea mug. "About us." She nodded. "But it always ended before this part. Before you knocked." Alan looked at her like she held the coordinates to something he'd spent a lifetime searching for. "I almost didn't. I stood outside for 20 minutes, thinking you deserved better than a broken man in a wet coat. But I waited," she whispered. He reached for her hand then, tentative like a man approaching holy ground. "No more waiting," he said. From that night everything changed. Quietly, slowly, like the bloom of a flower that had lived too long in the dark. At work they kept their rhythm. No stolen glances, no whispers, only efficiency. But beneath the surface, everything had shifted. They now shared lunches in the park, emails that ended with a secret smile, post-it notes with coffee orders and little hearts hidden in the loops of G's and A's. Grace had learned to hope. Alan had learned to stay. One Friday evening, months later, Alan invited her to his apartment. It was the first time she'd seen the space where he let the world fall away. It was tidy, with old jazz records and framed black and white photos of his parents in the shop. "I keep it like this to remember where I started," he said, handing her a glass of wine. Grace touched the frame gently. "They'd be proud of you." He sat beside her on the couch, wine untouched, hands restless. "There's something I haven't told you." Her heart skipped. "What is it?" He exhaled. "I've been offered a position. Out of state. A big one." Silence stretched between them like a taut wire. "When?" she asked. "2 months. And what do you want?" He looked at her and his voice cracked. "I want you." The words weren't poetic. They were raw, full of need and clarity. "Then stay." "I can't." The moment splintered. He saw the flicker of fear in her eyes. "Come with me." She blinked. "What?" "It's not just a job. It's a new start. And I don't want it if you're not in it." Grace felt the old ghosts rise. The girl who whispered, "He'll never see me," now standing face to face with a man asking her to be seen forever. "I can't just leave," she said softly. He nodded, pain clouding his features. "I know." Beat passed. Then another. "But maybe I can." Alan frowned. "I've spent so long hiding, being what people needed. But what if this is what I need? Us." She nodded. "Yes, us." 2 months passed like a breath in a storm. She gave notice. He cleared his office. Their last day at the firm was a quiet one, except for the whispers that had finally turned to smiles. They left together, hands entwined, the city behind them glowing in the dusk. In their new life there were no secrets. Just coffee in mismatched mugs, unpacked boxes, and 1,000 small ordinary joys. Grace started painting again. Alan read the news every morning beside her, feet tangled under the kitchen table. Some days were hard, but none were lonely. One evening, as they walked by a lake near their new home, Grace paused. "Do you still see me?" she asked. Alan stopped, turned to her, and cupped her face in his hands. "Every day," he whispered. "Like the first time. Like the only time." She smiled through tears. "Then let's keep walking." So they did. 2 shadows merging into one. No longer hiding. No longer waiting. Just love. Finally spoken. Finally heard. And finally home.